freedom, it's outreach to the world. And as we sing the Star Spangled Banner today, I want you to kind of silently be thinking about a prayer in your heart for troops are being deployed. I don't know, are you on the camera? Anyway, we know that some troops are being moved into Poland. We know what that means. We know what they do. We know why they're there. And we need to be a people of prayer and concern.
I see most everyone have song sheets, but if you missed one coming in, just excuse yourself, go on back and get one. And we're going to do the Star Spangled Banner. We'll do our hymnal 375 next, and we're going to do all the verses today. No holding back. And then on the last hymn, then will be on the song sheet for God Bless America. So we're going to do the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh
be seated.
This morning, I have my follow-up message on that prophet, Elijah. Sometimes I've had these two sermons back to back like this through the years, and I sometimes admit with certain reservation that as I studied these two ancient prophets, Elijah, who throws his mantle, his cloak, and it's picked up by Elisha. These two prophets whose lives are intertwined for a number of years. As I've developed this account, it seems that the story and the application to ministry, even to this day, are important. And it's important because we need to have a grasp, an understanding, a continuity of what's going on with the ancient Bible that leads up to the birth of Jesus Christ. All of you realize that Elisha is in the 9th century BC. So, some 800 plus years before our Lord and Savior was born in Bethlehem, these prophets were working for God, working for the people of God, and they're located in the northern kingdom. That kingdom was called Israel. The southern kingdom was usually referred to as Judah, which is about all the history that many of us, myself included, can grab hold of and really keep sorted out. So Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom at this time. And we have these ancient words that share a story that has so many complexities. It's like I probably should let you know with a certain level of reservation from my part. I'm sharing some heartfelt, deep struggles. This sermon has been in the process since somewhere in, like from 1990. Does anybody here still remember 1990? Most of us. Yeah. Okay. You were born in before that?
Yeah.
Oh, I always thought you were much younger. So, this is a message in the making over the course of many years. Now, I'm going to basically use chapter 5 of 2 Kings. So if you got your Bible with you, you have your Bible on your phone, or if you want to use that as a good excuse to play solitaire while I'm in the sermon, you can do that. Pretend you're looking at the Bible and play solitaire. I'm not going to tell you how I know that happened. But I don't have solitaire on my phone. I don't want to be tempted. So, chapter 5, 2 Kings. This time I did bring the correct Bible with the correct marker. Now, story starts out, chapter 5. You have a fellow named, his name is Naaman. He is not Jewish. He would be a Gentile. Not only is he not Jewish, he also has a skin condition, which many skin conditions in the ancient world were called leprosy. You can all go, ooh. Nobody wanted to do that. So, he has leprosy. He is a mighty warrior for the land that we would probably geographically identify as Syria. So, he's a general, and he's important. Now, I will read. And as I need to stop, I will stop and say, hey, I'm adding in a few words. Naaman, a general for the king of Aram, was a great man and highly regarded by his master. That would be the king, an unnamed king. Why the king is unnamed? Remember, these are oral tradition stories that get finally written down. So they weren't sure who the king was. Because through him, the Lord had given victory to Aram. Now, he's a Gentile. He has leprosy. He's an enemy of the Jewish people in general. The general is an enemy. So, and God gave them victory over the Israelites. This was a mighty warrior, but he had a skin disease. It's called, this particular translation doesn't say leprosy, but it was leprosy. Now, army raiding parties, in other words, these were intrusions into Israel, had gone out and captured a young girl from the land of Israel. She served Naaman's wife. So the general takes home, as a spoil of war, a young girl who is held captive and in servitude to the general's wife, little Jewish girl. I added in little Jewish girl because that's just kind of the way I call her and think. Now, the little Jewish girl said to her mistress, I wish that my master could come before the prophet who lives in Samaria. He would cure him of his skin disease. So Naaman went and told his master, that's the king, that the young girl from the land of Israel, what the young girl from the land of Israel had said. Time out, right? Okay. Here's a small working girl held in servitude to the general's wife, and she's Jewish, and she says these words that the prophet in Samaria could cleanse her master, Naaman. When Jewish people hear this story, they're going, why would one of our Jewish girls want to tell this general to go visit the prophet in Samaria? Now that prophet is Elisha. So here's what happened. Yeah, if you think about it too much, you're going, why did this? What's going on here? Well, in a few minutes or less, I'll probably be telling you about the working of our living God, who created all that is, created all the people. Whether they have an understanding of God at that moment, we'll hear about that. So, then, Armin's king, Abraham, he said, go ahead, I'll send a letter to Israel's king. So Naaman left. He took along 10 click bars of silver, 6,000 6,000 shekels of gold. A shekel is about an ounce of gold. So if you want to do the math, 6,000 ounces of gold. $2 million. Somebody nod your head if you think that sounds right. Yeah, he's taking a bundle of cash with him and 10 changes of clothing. King James Version says something about 10 suits of armor. As you're well aware, military, when a military, whether it's today's Army man or a Navy SEAL or a pilot climbing into a jet airplane, those things are expensive. So here's what happened. He brought the letter to Israel's king. It read, "Along with this letter, I'm sending you my servant Naaman, so you can cure him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he ripped his clothes, not Naaman's clothes, he ripped his own clothes. He said, "What? Am I God to hand out death and life? But this king writes me, asking me to cure someone of his skin disease. You must realize that he wants to start a fight with me." So the king of Israel is going, ah! He tears his tunic, cries out in anguish, "What am I going to do?" They're trying to start another war. When Elijah, the man of God, heard that Israel's king had ripped his clothes, he sent word to the king. "Why did you rip your clothes? Let the man come to me. Then he'll know that there's a prophet in Israel." Elisha, he didn't say, "Wait a minute, this guy's a Gentile." He didn't say, "Wait a minute, this guy's the general of an army that's been leading incursions into our territory and stealing people for slaves. Wait a minute, I don't think we should do this. Let's go ahead and have a war." Elijah didn't say that. He said, "Send him to me." But Naaman went away in anger. Oh, wait a second. I jumped a couple paragraphs. So, Naaman arrived with his horses and chariots. He stopped at the door of Elijah's house. Elijah sent out a messenger who said, I'm going to tell you what the messenger said, but I want you to think about this. The general, he didn't leave his home with just one cart, one chariot, and a couple of soldiers. No. This would have, Naaman the general would have been traveling with an entourage of armed soldiers, horses, a lot more than one chariot, and he's carrying, how many ounces of gold? 6,000 ounces of gold, which is, I don't know how many pounds that is.
In my version, it does say, hang in there a minute.
Okay.
750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold.
He's probably got a platoon or a company of soldiers with him. So they come up to Elisha's home there in Samaria, because Elijah liked to live in town. You know, he had been a country boy, but he moved into town after he got the cloak. So after he got the mantle of Elijah, he stayed in town. So they're at his home. Can you imagine having a company of soldiers at your home? So he sends down his messenger. He doesn't go down a person to meet Naaman. He sends down a messenger. And the messenger says this to Naaman, the general. Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and become clean. That was the whole message. But Naaman went away in anger. He said, I thought for sure that he'd come our part better than all that Israel's wives. Couldn't I wash in them and get clean? So he turned away and proceeded to leave in anger. So the general's leaving in anger. He thought that Elisha would come down and wave his hand over him, thought he would do some kind of prayer, thought there would be pomp and circumstance and robes and people carrying staffs and incense burners. Just use your imagination and make a great movie, wouldn't it? This is probably been made into a movie. So he went away in anger, and it does remind me that the hometown of Naaman is a place called Damascus. How many of you remember that from stories? Yeah. Okay. So, now, here's the rest of the story. Naaman's servants came up to him and spoke to him. Now, the way they addressed Naaman, I think that this particular colonel or lieutenant is related to Naaman because he says, "Our father, if the prophet had told you to do something difficult, would you have done it?" All he said to you was, "Wash and become clean." So Naaman went down and bathed in the Jordan 7 times, just as the man of God had said. His skin was restored like that of a young boy, and he became clean. He was healed. I want to remind you that long ago, 2,000 years ago, not 2,800 years ago, a lady ran up behind Jesus and touched his garment, and she was healed. And when Jesus said, who was it that touched me? He said to that woman, touching me is not what healed you, but your faith has made you whole. Here, Naaman, he shoves off all that stuff about the gods of Damascus, the foreign gods, and he does what the prophet tells him to do. It is an act of faith that heals Naaman. We need to be all aware of that. Now, as he continues on, Naaman returns to the man of God with all his attendants. Now, see, they make a suggestion there that there's a company of soldiers. There's so many pounds of silver, anyway, a lot of gold and silver and clothing, our military gear. So he came and stood before Elisha, saying, now this time he meets Elisha. Now I know for certain there's no God anywhere on earth except in Israel. Naaman acknowledges that there is a God. And he said, there's only one God. Please accept a gift from your servant. Naaman says, I'm your servant. The general from Damascus, Aram. But Elijah says, I swear by the life of the Lord I serve that I won't accept anything. You see, the healing of Naaman is from God, not from Elisha. Naaman urged Elisha to accept something, but he still refused. Then Naaman said, if not, then let me, your servant, have 2 mule loads of earth. So he wanted about 4 bushels, baskets of dirt. Your servant will never again offer entirely burned offerings or sacrifices to any of the gods except the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. Naaman is acknowledging that God is the only God. He's only going to worship God. But because of his rank in the army and for his king, he has this special favor. When my master comes into Rimmon's temple to bow down there and is leaning on my arm, I must also bow down in Rimmon's temple. When I bow down in Rimmon's temple, may the Lord forgive your servant for doing that. Elisha said to him, go in peace. Elisha, the man of God, is acknowledging that sometimes people you don't agree with, sometimes people you don't understand, sometimes people that are Gentiles and not Jewish are going to do things that you don't agree with. But in this case, he told Naaman to go in peace. Very interesting. But when Naaman had gone some distance from Elisha, here's an unusual side part of this story that has to be shared. But when Naaman had gone some distance, Gehazi, who was the servant of Elisha, the man of God, thought, there's a plot, it's deceit, it's fun, it's going to change the whole thing here. My master let this Aramean Naaman off the hook by not accepting the gift he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I'll go after him and accept something from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. Naaman saw him running after him, so he got down off his chariot to meet him. He said, is everything okay? Now, note, here it says Naaman was on a chariot. So you know this is a big crowd. They've got horses. They have to feed and water the horses while they're traveling. It takes a lot of people to do that. Gehazi answered, yes, but my master sent me to say, 2 young men who are members of a group of prophets have just now come to me from the hills of Ephraim. Give them a kikkar of silver and 2 changes of clothing. Naaman said, by all means, take 2 kikkars, whatever 2 kikkars is. I wish they'd just say pounds.
75, yeah. 75.
75 pounds of silver. He encouraged Gehazi to accept it. He tied 2 kikkars of silver up in 2 bags, along with 2 changes of clothes. Naaman gave them to the 2 of his servants, and they carried them in front of Gehazi. So he loaned him 2 servants to carry this back to Samaria. When Gehazi arrived at the elevated fortress, he took the items from them and stored them in his house. So he takes the silver and the clothing, or army stuff, and goes to his house. Then he sent the servants away, and they left. Gehazi then went and stood before his master. Elisha is his master. Elijah said to Gehazi, where did you come from, Gehazi? Your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi replied. I'll add in, and he was lying, wasn't he? Yeah, he was deceitful. Elijah said to him, wasn't my heart going along with you when the man got off his chariot to meet you? Elisha knew exactly what had happened. In the same time to accept silver, clothes, olive trees, vineyards, sheep, cattle, or male and female servants. Naaman's skin disease will now cling to you and to your descendants forever. And Gehazi left Elisha's presence, flaky like snow with skin disease. I've read the whole story to you. Don't ever think that deceit is rewarded. And here we see it plainly. Now, as we approach communion, we're going to have prayer together, and we are going to share in the bread and the cup. We are going to remember that deceit of all sorts is not appreciated by our God. And that we are a people that stand firm, even back to 800 plus years before Jesus was born. The people of God were people of faith, and they were people of integrity, and Elisha did not withhold the miracle of healing from a neighbor who had been an enemy and who was a Gentile. And all God's people said together, Amen. For those that are